Welcome, everyone, and so lovely to have you here with us for classes at Drisha. Today's class is the continuation of the series on Heschel's The Prophets with Dr. Dror Bondi. And just a few words about Dror Bondi is dedicated to bringing Abraham Joshua Heschel's thought to Israel, translating his words into Hebrew and transforming Israel by his spirit. His PhD is from Bar Ilan University, and his translations and his own writings are highly acclaimed. And with that, I'll turn this to you, Dror.
Thank you very much. Today, we are continuing our journey in the Bible in order to meet the prophets by the introductions of Heschel. In our last classes, we met Hosea and we met Amos. The uniqueness of the interpretation of Heschel is to dwell into the experience of the prophet, of every prophet, to understand what his unique experience as a prophet. And in Amos, we met the God of justice. Yes, Amos brought us the anger of God because he can't suffer our injustice behavior. In Hosea, we met a very special prophet who understood his own life as an echo of the experience of God. God felt that he is like a husband of us, a very complicated woman, and Hosea had sympathy to the divine pathos and experienced his own life as a way to understand the experience of God. Today, we are going to meet a very different prophet, Isaiah. Isaiah was a political prophet. He was the advisor of the king, not like Amos and Hosea, who were simple human beings who lived in the villages, but someone who lived in Jerusalem and helped the king to decide the right political decision. And most of the interpretations which were written about Isaiah, about Isaiah, put their focus on his political actions. And Heschel also, in the first half of the chapter about Isaiah, wrote several pages about Isaiah as a political prophet. But for us, the second half about his experience as a prophet is much more interesting, to get into the soul of Isaiah, to try to understand his relationship with God. And here we are going to meet another kind of prophet. Isaiah spoke about God, felt God as a parent of the Jewish people, as if we are his rebellious kid. And as a parent, for Isaiah, the most deep feeling of God is the sorrow, not the anger, not the love, but the sorrow, the disappointment. Let's read Heschel's interpretations and the text of Isaiah himself. Of course, Heschel accepted the basic understanding of the Bible scholarship about the vision of Isaiah between at least two prophets. I believe you know that from Isaiah chapter 40, it is at least another one or maybe two other much later prophets. So Heschel wrote only about the 39 first chapters of Isaiah, which spoke about a prophet who lived around 750 and 700 before the Common Era. maybe I will add a short historical context. In these years, Assyria get into all the Middle East. Before Assyria came into our area, there were only wars between the tribes here. Yes, Edom and Moab and Ammon and Aram and Israel and Yehuda. This is small tribes which were here in our land of Israel and around the land of Israel. But then came a new empire, Assyria, and took all the area. And this is the historical context of Isaiah to understand what is the will of God, what Yehuda, yes, he is the prophet of Yehuda, what is Yehuda should do, and what will be the future of the other tribes of Israel. As you know, Assyria took the 10 tribes of Israel and took them to the exile, and they lost from the Jewish history. So this is the historical context, and let's read Heschel's interpretation. Okay, like our ancient costume, who will be our first reader today? Emily, thank you.
The speech that opens the book of Isaiah and which sets the tone for all the utterances by this prophet deals not with the anger, but with the sorrow of God. The prophet pleads with us to understand the plight of a father whom his children have abandoned. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. Sons have I reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, and the ass its master's crib. But Israel does not know. My people does not understand. The prophet laments in his own words the children's desertion of their father. They have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. But the sympathy for God's injured love overwhelms his whole being. What he feels about the size of God's sorrow and the enormous scandal of man's desertion of God is expressed in the 2 lines quoted above, which introduced God's lamentation. Hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men that you hear, that you weary my God also? In different words addressed to the king, the prophet conveys his impression of the mood of God. As happened in the time of Noah and as is happening again, God's patience and long suffering are exhausted. He is tired of man. He hates man's homage, his festivals, his celebration. Man has become a burden and a sorrow for God. What to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fatted beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or of he-goats. When you come to appear before me, who requires of you this trampling of my courts? Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of assemblies, I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hates. They have become a burden to me that I am weary to bear. When you spread forth your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. The weariness of God, an important theological category in Isaiah's thinking, brings about a greater concealment of his personal involvement in history. It is a time in which divine anger becomes active in history.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a long quote, but you read it with the right intonation, right? Maybe all of us as parents can feel identification with the weariness of God. There are times in which it is not easy with you kids, for me at least. Hosea and Isaiah, this is his experience as a prophet, as if God discovered before him his weariness, his tiredness. Yes, God can't suffer our sacrifices when he sees our behavior, our moral behavior. Yes, suddenly to understand this famous verses as a saying of a parent who can't suffer his kid's presence when he knows, she knows from where they brought it and by which feelings. Don't try to make a manipulation to me. Yes, you know these feelings with kids. I want that you will be good persons. Don't try to give me sacrifice presents. And this is a very unique understanding of this famous verses as the saying of a parent. Why God can't suffer our sacrifices? Because he feel like a parent that his kids try to manipulate him or her. And this is God's lamentation, as if God, how do you say it in Yiddish, make rechten. Yes, I can't suffer anymore your behavior. You make me you make me feel sorrow. Yes, so and the last words of Heschel is that this is the source of the divine anger, according to Isaiah, Isaiah. Yes, why God so anger? Not because of justice, like Amos, but because his weariness, because his disappointment, because he is an anger parent. Yes, as we all feel, I believe. There are times you have to show your children that you want them to change their behavior. And in order to the children can understand you have to say to your kid, you have to stay at home, you can go to your friends. The children feel it like punishment, but and maybe feel it as if it is only an anger, but the parent himself know that all this anger, uh, this is not the deepest relation of him or her to his or to her kids, but this is only a result of weariness, of disappointment, of a soul. Yes, and for Ishayahu, has to understand this occupation of Assyria as a result of a sorrow, it is a very interesting interpretation of history. Every one of us can think about our own history today in these days, and to think about the problem of our history as a result of the sorrow of God. He, Isaiah feel that God tried it is educational punishment. Yes, he tried to make us better human beings. So we don't know how to do it. Yes, he very tired of us. Don't know what to do. So he became angry, right? And what do you say about this new kind of any saying, any question? You should unmute yourself.
In an earlier class, you spoke about, a more Maimonidean approach to God. So would you say that, is Heschel saying that the prophets, Yeshayahu here, is a philosopher or a theologian similar to Maimonides, but obviously with a different, tools, different philosophical tools?
No, I wouldn't say it. It is not he is a prophet, namely someone who feels the feelings of God, someone who feels God's pathos. He is not speaking about ideas, about theological conceptions, but about the relationship between God and the Jewish people, or all the Bnei Israel. He heard the crying of God, as if he saw, his eyes, his disappointment eyes. Yes, and this is the prophets. The prophets were not the philosophers, but maybe I can say like matchmakers, between God and the Jewish people, and they came back to us from God in order to explain us God's feelings, in order to change our behavior, in order to bring back the good relationship between God and the Jewish people.
But in doing that, in introducing and connecting God, the Jewish people with God, they're actually creating a sense of who God is, what God is. Clearly not in other words, is this the kind of philosophy that existed in that time?
No, I don't say it. They never spoke about what is God, but who is God. It's a very different kind of question. They don't speak about God. They don't spoke about God. They didn't speak about God, but they heard God's words and feelings and pathos to them. Yes, it's just like you can't make equation. This is the word between a philosopher and a poet. Yes, you can't make equation between a prophet and a philosopher, and also you can't do it between a poet and a prophet. This is a three different expression. The philosophers spoke about, the poet, poetry. Well, it's not description. Yes, poetry is not description. It is invitation to something more deeper than the words. And the prophet is in the middle of relationship of yes. You can speak about your love to try to understand it like a philosopher. You can write a poetry about your love in order to invite other people to feel it, and you can speak with your lover. And to hear his feelings, to bring his expressions. This is the prophet.
Judith, you have a question, right, or a comment?
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry, Judith.
Okay, perfect. No, it's
Judith,
okay.
of course. Yes.
Yes. So I'm sorry, I have a terrible cold, so I can't read today. But I do have a question or a comment. Is the prophet is the only one of these three you've described who has a mission? He has a purpose. He has to accomplish something. He has to cause a change. It's not enough that he's able to describe God's sorrow or anger or despair or whatever. He needs to change that situation. He needs to help Israel change in order to make God stop feeling sorrow and anger. It's a dynamic situation.
Yes, but his tools is to bring God's feelings to the people in order to make them do change, to change the way of life. You know, in the Jewish history, there were the sages, yes, Chazal, yes, who tried another way of make the people change by creating the halacha. It is another way of make people change. And the prophets, this is their way. And there are times this is what help you make change, and other times this is the contribution of the prophets. So let's continue. Okay, Ziva, you have to be our next reader.
Okay.
Oh,
There is sorrow in God's anger. It is an instrument of purification, and its exercise will not last forever. Quote, for the Lord will have compassion on Jacob and will again choose Israel and settle them in their own land, and the stranger shall join himself to them and will cleave to the house of Jacob. His mercy is not discarded, merely suspended. His anger lasts a moment, it does not endure forever. Quote, in a very little while, my indignation will come to an end. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the indignation is past. Isaiah 10. Anger is not his disposition, but a state he waits to overcome. Quote, therefore, the Lord waits to be gracious to you. Therefore, he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all those who wait for him.
thank you. Thank you. So here Heschel added another implication of the understanding that the source of God's anger is his sorrow. The saying of Ishayahu that all these results of God's anger will not endure forever. Yes, you should wait. as we, you know, when your parent has anger, or yes, or you are the parent, and you know what I'm speaking about, right? You know that he or she loves you, yes, but now he has anger because his sorrow, because his or her disappointment, because you know that you were not a good kid, so you can understand his anger, and you know you only have to wait until his love or her love or mercy will come back again. Yes, and this is the source of the political advisement of Ishayahu, that Yehuda, yes, the tribe of Yehuda should wait for for God's salvation, for God's help, and indeed there were the miracle, the famous miracle, and suddenly the army of Assyria left Jerusalem and let us live. Let us live. Yes, the tribe of Yehuda. Suddenly Assyria lived, and for Ishayahu, Ashur was a result of God's anger, but please wait. Yes, shut your doors behind you, hide yourself for a little while until the indignation is past. Yes, so this is Ishayahu's perspective, Ishayahu's understanding of God's involvement in the history as a parent, as a as a parent who had disappointment and sorrow, and this is the source of his anger. Okay, so let's continue. Yes, here we are going to read the famous allegory of God's vineyard, yes, of Ishayahu. I believe you heard about it. So let's see Heschel's interpretation. Here we can see another allegory, not of father and son, but of owner of vineyard and the viner. It's a close allegory to the allegory of a parent. Ziva, do you want to continue?
To Hosea, Israel is God's consort. To Yeshayahu, God's vineyard. Yeshayahu's sympathy for God comes to expression in a parable describing the crisis in the relationship between God and Israel. I will sing of my friend the song of this love for his vineyard. My friend had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He digged, he cleared it of stones, and planted it with choice vines. He built a tower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine press in it. He looked for it to yield grapes, but it yielded sour grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, between me and my vineyard. What more should I have done for my vineyard that I have not done for it? Wherefore, when I looked for it to yield grapes, why did it yield sour grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. He looked for justice, but behold, there is violence. For righteousness, there is outrage. That's Isaiah 5, 1-7. In this song of the vineyard, the prophet speaks first in his own name, verses 1-2, then as the voice of God, verses 3-6, and again in his own name, verse 7. What personal attitude is reflected in the prophet's words? It is first the prophet's love of God, who is called my friend, and for whom he sings a love song concerning his vineyard. He neither rebukes the people's ingratitude, nor bewails their prospect of ruin and disgrace. The prophet's sympathy is for God, whose care for the vineyard has been of no avail. God's sorrow, rather than the people's tragedy, is the theme of this song. The song contains a gentle allusion to the grief and disappointment of God. He feels hurt as though of abandoning the vineyard. He feels hurt as the thought of abandoning the vineyard. He had rejected the vineyard, had rejected it. He had rejoiced in, and in which he had placed so much hope and care.
Thank you. Heschel wrote so lovely, right? About especially here. Yes, he understood the sorrow of his friend, the friend of Ishayahu, yes, but of all of us. God is a friend for which the prophet had sympathy. He understood God's sorrow. He understood God's disappointment. He had no so much sympathy for the people, right? The people, the house of Israel, made sour grapes, yes. God did all what he can do in order to make a good vineyard, yes, but we are the Jewish people, and the house of Israel made injustice with God, yes. He looked for justice, but we made violence. In the original Hebrew of the Bible, there is other words here that you can't translate into English. in the original, in the Hebrew, Ishayahu said that God looked for mishpat, but there was a mishpach. It's a unique word, what is mishpach, but you can translate it into English. And also the next line, for tzedakah, but there was tzeaka. You can translate poetry into another language, but Heschel indeed succeeded to bring us the feeling of God in the words of the prophet. This is a good translation of feelings, not of words. Yes, Heschel is a good translator of God's pathos from the words of the prophet, from the sympathy of the prophet to us, to the modern reader. And Heschel also explained us why in this song the prophet spoke first in his own name, and then in the voice of God, and then in his own name. Yes, there were scholars who tried to say that this is not one writer. Yes, how can he change his perspective from here to there? Maybe it's a creation of two writers, etc. But Heschel explained that this is the way of the prophet to have sympathy with God. In one moment he spoke about God, and in the other moment he spoke from his own soul, and then go back to God's perspective, because he has so sympathy for God. What do you say? Any comment if you want to add?
It's a beautiful, beautiful poem, but the metaphor feels a little harsh. If your vineyard does not bring forth the grapes you expected, to then totally destroy it, trample it, and hide your face from it, and God's reaction, it's kind of extreme. And the fact that Ishayahu's response is one of wait for God to come back, hide from his anger and wait, feels somewhat passive. I mean, in the political sense, if you're looking at the situation and Assyria is coming to destroy you, and you're being told to wait for God and not to react militarily or politically, it feels passive.
Maybe in the beginning, Isaiah tried to spoke about God as a parent, but as much the situation became worse, he can't use it again with this metaphor of parent, because the situation was so terrible. So he tried to explain it in another allegory in which you can explain or maybe understand more why the anger is so heavy, why the results of the anger are so harsh. Yes, all except Jerusalem, all Yehuda was destroyed by Assyria. Yes, like the wine. Yeah, yes. Maybe this is the reason for Ishayahu to spoke about it as a vineyard instead of a kid. Is more understandable, maybe. But the question is how Ishayahu can explain the destiny of the 10 tribes of Israel. This is more complicated for the prophet to explain the people why the punishment was so harsh to the 10 tribes of Israel. And Heschel explained in unique interpretation the famous prophecy of Ishayahu chapter 6. You know this chapter? Every Sabbath you quoted from this chapter. Kadosh, 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 etc. So, but this is only a small part of all this famous prophecy of of Ishayahu, and Heschel has here a very unique explanation of this prophecy as a saying about the 10 tribes. So let's read it. Maybe Emily, you want to read again?
And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Then I said, "Here I am, send me." And he said, "Go and say to this people, hear and hear, but do not understand. See and see, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people fat and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn to and be healed." Then I said, "How long, O Lord?" And he said, "Until cities lie waste without inhabitants and houses without men." The mandate Isaiah receives is fraught with an appalling contradiction. He is told to be a prophet in order to thwart and defeat the essential purpose of being a prophet. He is told to face his people while standing on his head. Did he not question his own faculties of seeing, hearing, and understanding when perceiving such a message? What gave him the certainty that it was God's voice speaking to him? It is generally assumed that the mission of a prophet is to open the people's hearts, to enhance their understanding, and to bring about rather than to prevent their turning to God. Was not Isaiah's entire ministry devoted to persuading, to exhorting, and to influencing his people? I venture to advance a hypothesis that this perplexing prophecy can be understood only if applied to the northern kingdom. Punishment described in the Bible is of two kinds, physical and spiritual. It is the second kind which Isaiah is told about. The people of the northern kingdom are to be deprived of sensitivity to God and the ability to repent.
Okay, so this is indeed a very strange, prophecy. The Lord sent Ishayahu to say the people that they will now understand. So what is the meaning of such a mission? So Heschel explained that this is Ishayahu understanding of the fate of the 10 tribes, of the northern kingdom. Their punishment will be the most harsh spiritual punishment. The punishment is that they will not understand, that they can't repent, they can't make tshuva. Deeds were so terrible, so God lost his hope for them. This is a very harsh prophecy of Ishayahu, especially when we have in our mind a parent. How can a parent lose his hope for his kid? But Ishayahu saw the fate of the 10 tribes and tried to understand how it was happened, and suddenly understood this is the first prophecy of Ishayahu, of Isaiah, and suddenly understood what was his first prophecy. Why God told him to go to the people and tell them that they will not perceive. Why? Because this is their most harsh punishment. God lost his hope. God understood that he can't help the 10 tribes of Israel, that he will have to lose this kid. It's a very, very harsh prophecy, interpretation of Heschel, but the fate was very harsh, The 10 tribes were taken by Assyria, and the Jewish tribe, the tribe of Yehuda, will not see them anymore. How a prophet can explain it to the people? How can he explain God's behavior in history to the people? as a punishment as a spiritual punishment. They were deprived of sensitivity to God. That's why God can't help them. Yes, because they lost the ability to listen to God. And so, what can God do with such tribe who lost his spiritual ability to listen to God? It's not easy to read it in our days, right?
When I read it, I know the Hebrew, so I know that it's very, very, very like difficult to get clarity. But I sort of question the idea of that there seems, in what Heschel is saying, there seems to be like, it almost seems as if the punishment is that God deprives them or takes away their sensitivity to God. But I feel, especially since this is in Isaiah's sort of like in his, when God is sending him out on this mission, it feels a little bit as if he's explaining what happened in the 10 tribes. And also he's telling Isaiah that sometimes it's possible that your words will have the opposite impact of what you want them to have. That
Yes.
your words will actually fatten their hearts because people react against.
Yes.
I know that happens in the prophets. So I feel like it's almost God describing, like preparing Yeshayahu for his mission in this way, warning him about the people.
Yes.
And maybe he's referring to the northern kingdom, which has recently been destroyed, and sort of that's what happened there.
Yes. And it is very similar to God saying to Moses about Paro. Yes.
Yeah.
I will harsh his heart. He will not understand you. So God prepared Moshe Rabbeinu to his mission. And here too you said God prepared Ishayahu to a very similar mission. They will not understand you. This is the spiritual punishment. And prepare yourself. I send you to tell them my anger, but prepare yourself to the harsh situation in which they will not understand you. What a sorrow of a parent who understood that he lost hope for his kid, that his kid will not understand him, can't understand him anymore. He did all what he can do, but whoa, yes, it's harsh situation, and God has had to prepare the prophet for this mission. Thank you. Anyone else want to add, to ask?
You alluded to it, but the thought of God hardening the heart and not being able to repent, as hearing it with our contemporary ears, it is really very frightening, because it often feels that way. It feels like people that you would expect to have a sensitivity, a religious awareness. They call themselves religious, and yet they are doing very much the way God describes. They are doing the rituals, the so-called sacrifices, the expected rituals, but they are not doing what God really wants of man.
Yes.
And it's so painful to watch.
Yes.
It resonates with the contemporary scene.
Yes. And maybe in this sense, Heschel's interpretation about the Northern Kingdom is maybe a comfort, because there were Christians writers who explained that this is about us, the Jewish people, that God lost our his hope for all the Jewish people, and then there will be the New Testament. So Heschel had to explain, no, this is only about the 10 tribes, but there is still a hope for the Jewish people, and maybe also today we can hope that there will be at least part of us that can understand God's demand, God's expectation of a Jewish behavior. What is the mission of the Jewish people? It's a harsh saying, but this is the situation of Ishayahu. It is very complicated. Who knows what will be in our close future?
Dror, do you see what Yehudit wrote in the
Oh,
chat?
yes, the question about Bchira Chofshit. This is the answer of Maimonides about Paro. When Maimonides tried to explain how God took the Bchira Chofshit, yes, the free choice of Paro, explained Maimonides, Rambam, that this was such a punishment. So maybe Heschel's explanation is the same. And I just want to add that our 2 next classes will be about Jeremiah, which is the longest chapter in Heschel's The Prophet, and I believe the most complicated and the most interesting chapter. So be well and have a good week, and we will meet next Monday.
Okay, thank you so much,
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you, Dror. And we always have more classes that you can sign up for. So feel free to learn more and go and register on our website at 5783.drisha.org. And yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone next time. Lehitraot.
Thank you.
Thank you.